Thank you so much, Ben, and thank you for the opportunity that I would be able to share with you my observations about um, Taiwan semiconductor share, USA-Taiwan-China relationship. And just a note before I start, New Bloom and Taiwan Insight, we are collaborating. So there's no problem though, we go for both. So I also would have to, I said to Brian to apologize that the first few slides actually are identical to his keynote speech, but no problem. From the slide number 3, I have the different thoughts. So what I would like to share with you and discuss with you today is to see, well, I think most of our audience already being well educated, saturated by Taiwan updates this time about whether Taiwan is or is not the most dangerous place on earth. You might have your ideas. I would say I'm really not a copycat, but because those are the pictures that I can get. But you will see later on what I will talk about whether Taiwan is the most dangerous place on earth. And then I'm getting to my topic. What are the semiconductors? What can they be used? What can they make in our daily life? Can we live without them? And then I wanted to get into, I'm not a EE engineering experts, but I wanted to get into the connection of the global value chain and semiconductor. And then you will see the dilemma or the interesting knots of Taiwan in this conjunction of the global supply chain. Many people have asked me why Taiwan is so good at producing the high quality semiconductors, advanced chips. As Brian yesterday mentioned that Taiwan TSMC actually manufactured 90% of advanced chips. That means, what does mean advanced chips? That means that very, very small nanometer chips, less than 3 nanometers, for instance. I will explain a little bit more later. And I would tell you my observation, why Taiwan is so good here. And then we will be able to discuss actually at the QA, well, you think along with my observation, Taiwan can be shelled by the semiconductor or by the TSMC in that sense. So to start with, that's very familiar picture. I've seen many, many, many times. So to recap, this is economists, and it is to discuss whether Taiwan is the most dangerous place on earth because of, again, you will see this you also saw yesterday, so I'm not emphasizing too much. Pelosi's visit, but I pull out of our Taiwan Insight special issue, USA, Taiwan, China, what can go to the next. And there are next steps as this picture, although Brian mentioned, but didn't show it, so I can show it. That is President Tsai's stopover in the USA, whether that would be a win for Taiwan. And as also Brian mentioned yesterday, the presidential candidate Lai Ching-te was also in the trend of visiting of the USA. So all that, it's put into this picture, which are the fighter jets cross the median line of the Taiwan Straits, and also a frequent visits from the PLA's Air Force to Taiwan. But a note here is, the fighter jets visiting along the island or cross the median line actually wasn't that rare. Actually started in 1996, the missile threat of Taiwan's first presidential, well, we say first presidential election, that already has an intimidation from the PLA to Taiwan. The purpose of the fighter jet or any kinds of the military exercise, of course, for all of our audience understanding and also our speakers already indicated, is to influence Taiwan's elections and Taiwan's people's hearts and minds towards China. I'm not going into that direction, but just to reinforce or recap of what you have already been well informed by our previous speakers about this kind of tension cross-trade. But actually, the semiconductor tension is going beyond of the cross-strait tension because it involves Taiwan, China, of course, and USA, and Japan, South Korea, and EU. So far, Australia being quiet, but Australia is at the user end. I'll get into that for a little while. So I think, in my understanding, yes, Taiwan is the most dangerous place on earth because of our great neighbor, China. But later on, during my observation sharing with you, I will say Taiwan is not just the most dangerous place on earth, but also most desirable place on earth because what Taiwan or TSMC is producing. So what are the semiconductors? Those are the little design that you can see in the picture, and it powered our daily life, including everything computer-wise, including everything mobile-wise, but actually also including everything car usage. Okay, so every modern car not being horsed by the real horses, it's powered by chips. I mentioned earlier at the very beginning that the TSMC Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company manufactured the most advanced chip that is 2-3 nanometers to a production scale. However, those chips that you can see are indicated in the car actually do not need that advanced chips. They need the size of 28 nanometer, bigger, right? And this bigger size of the chips that being produced, actually, the biggest producer is China. Gentlemen, says right. So China manufactured 50% of the matured or legacy chip, if you like, whereas Taiwan in the advanced chip, that is the leading character. We mentioned about 90%. So the technology-wise, yes, Taiwan, of course, can manufacture 50%, bigger size. Smaller is more difficult, much, much more difficult. However, Taiwan actually only going to this trend of manufacture the most advanced ones. The foundries, which is a factory to manufacturing chips, they do not make the advanced, the legacy chip anymore. Okay, so this is a hint to say that the legacy chip or bigger chip actually are still being manufactured by China in that sense. Okay, so if we don't have chip, what can we do? I think that we can't do anything in a modern life sense. We will not have the computer. We don't have the mobile. We don't have Google House. We don't have any AI design. Some of us may have the AI refrigerator, so your refrigerator may not work anyway. So it's just to say that chips is in our daily life, but the advanced chips actually are not that common to be used. That's used in, especially in mobile. Apple Mobile, most of people might have, and that's especially used in the defense system, right? The very sophisticated military weaponry system. Okay. So those are the understanding of the chips, and then I'm getting to what is the global supply chain. You could see why it probably would be very difficult to decouple or to manufacturing chip by any given one country. So to start with, the argument is no country can actually make semiconductors from beginning to end. This is the reason is the manufacturing the chips actually has more than 100 steps of the procedures. Each steps actually interlinked with each other from different countries. You could only blame this time not China, but globalization. And the cost, lower cost of the transport or logistic, especially after the globalization. Yeah. So the OECD's definition again about a global supply chain is to say that this is a network globally And it's a global network that cooperates and transforms the raw materials into finished goods and service for customers. So I just only mentioned that semiconductors would have more than 100 steps of production, but I haven't mentioned in the supply chain, that's also something to consider the materials and the equipment, right? So later on, I will have a chat to indicate which countries provide materials, which countries provide equipment, and which countries are the driving force to produce the chips, okay? So, but everything actually come together to provide this global supply chain, the whole picture, if you like. So, in other words, the global supply chain actually is to connect the suppliers. Oh, don't forget, that's also the suppliers and the designers, people who are designing the chips and also the blueprints, manufacturers, the distributors, and retail outlets and customers. So again, all that actually linked to this one point. No matter any one given country wanted so much, that is almost impossible. I still do not want to rule out the 1% percentage just in case, but it's almost impossible to make a semiconductor, even the legacy chip, even the bigger size legacy chip from beginning to end. Yeah. So here we are. We can see this is how the map of the supply chain. So the IP process, actually EDA and design, the core IP design actually are from American and UK. I am a little bit doubtful of the ARM because actually ARM has 51 or more than 50% by SoftBank. It's not really classified as a UK company, but anyway, let's take it as a headquarter in Cambridge. I'm a bit skeptical on that. But USA definitely control the core IP, okay? And IP is the key in the innovation. It's the key in the technology. So that's very important. The upper string of the supply chain. And the design as well is the USA design. And here we come of South Korea. Wrong. That is a memory chip. So in the world of the chips, in a very lay person understanding, there are two types. One type is a logic chip, which is manufactured by TSMC. Another type is a memory chip. People who are using the USB, for instance, the memory chip is manufactured by South Korea, previously Japan, but South Korea took over the market in 2000. But American is very good in designing the chip design of the logic chip in that sense. Now, we come to the frontier manufacturing. So Taiwan and South Korea are both in the logic chip, but actually TSMC has been the front runner, as we said. And that is also, if you see, as I mentioned earlier, we have China in the picture. So China is good, as I mentioned, to manufacture the mature nodes, the bigger size of the chip, yeah? Japan and South Korea, they're both good in memory chip, that's what I said. In terms of the back end, that is lower, and that's the packaging and testing. Here I said, well, now I said the SIE, actually their chart to say that it's Taiwan, China, and Japan. But sorry, Taiwan, China, and South Korea. However, the back end, the packaging and testing, because it's less skilled, require more of the cheaper labor. So China is winning out at the packaging and the testing. And along with other Southeast Asia countries, for instance, Malaysia also is emerging. India also wants to share a pie, a piece of pie, but it's not still yet on the map. That is manufacturing part, but don't forget I mentioned about equipment. You probably heard about the ASML, a Dutch company to provide the UEV lithography machine. It is a monopoly. It's only a Dutch company, ASML, to produce this machine. Okay, and of late, USA, I think it's earlier this year, signed agreement, or they claim that it's working. ASML and Japan, Tokyo Electronics agreed not to sell their machine to China. So that means that they cut off the way that China can produce because they do not provide the most advanced UEV machine for the Chinese chip making. Okay. So apart from the Dutch company, that is Japan. I mentioned that there's equipment and also material. Japan also produces silicon, which is the material, and rare earth for the chips to be made. USA, the applied materials is still a bigger percentage of the equipment supply, and the last one is the material. Taiwan actually, in terms of the material, only occupied much less percentage, I would say. The bigger one is Japan, rather than Taiwan. So in this map, what I would suggest to take a look, or to take the understanding is, yes, Taiwan is the key in terms of the manufacturing, especially on the front end, advanced manufacturing. However, if we only have TSMC, things will not work, right? So we still need IP, right? We need design, we need the equipment, we need also back end. Back end may be replaceable, and they are thinking of that. This is what you probably are familiar with, the decoupling or de-risking from China, right? But the whole map is to say that it's quite difficult to move away from this supply chain because it has already been divided according to, well, if you like, the neoliberals, which country can produce the better, and has been like that for quite a long time. Okay, so I'm now going into, after giving you a picture of the supply chain as a whole, I'm now going into the connection of USA-Taiwan first. I will then move into Taiwan-China. Yeah. So Taiwan is good in producing the semiconductor, but not at the beginning. Actually, Taiwan in the 70s, 60s was an island, quite deserted, and it's, you know, the economy was poor and everything. And the technological connection actually starts from the Hsinchu Science Park and Silicon Valley. So this is a very interesting year, which I would just share with you my observation. You agree, disagree, it's up to you. Hsinchu Science Park established in 1980. And in fact, apart from the Hsinchu Science Park, there's also Industry of Technology and Research Institute, ITRI, was established in 1973. Both institutes are government-oriented and also foster the connection with the USA. And actually started from the 70s and 80s, they were technology transfer, because you can't really make semiconductor without knowing anything, right? You need to have technology transfer from advanced country, that was USA. 1970s in Taiwan actually was quite turbulent in terms of international relations. Taiwan was out from the UN in 71. Our good friend American said goodbye to Taiwan in 1979, Taiwan Relation Act. Diplomatically, Taiwan was isolated. However, technology-wise, it started in 1980. Taiwan started to have a technology transfer from Silicon Valley. Groups of engineers sent to the USA to learn how to make things work. And also already started and worked engineers in the USA, for instance, TSMC's chairperson, Morris Strong, returned to Taiwan in the 70s. Not only him, along with groups of engineers, okay, educated in the USA. So it's very interesting for me to put two and two together. I'm not implying that American was doing this in the intention, but it's just interesting to see diplomatic-wise, Taiwan was isolated in the 70s, but the seed of technology connection started from 1970 and 80. And that is key importance because nothing will happen if you do not have the know-how transfer. And unfortunately, that know-how transfer was from the USA, from the Silicon Valley. And these connections still stays. So when I went to Stanford in March this year, it's a strong group of Taiwanese engineers who are working in Stanford, Palo Alto, that's the area, Silicon Valley, and they are making a connection between Taiwan's manufacturing and the USA designer. And that is important. This is the trust and people connection. Yeah. So that is the know-how part, right? Technology transfer. What does that link between Taiwan and China? So the production pattern, this is going back to my PhD part, which is Taishan, Taiwanese business in China, which is Taiwan's original equipment manufacturer factories in China to produce the Chiwa, that kind of the IT products for the world. It is made by Taiwanese company, but made in China. Yeah. The connection of Taiwanese investments in China, of course, decreased now, but it has been really important for both China and Taiwan's economy, especially in the 1990s and early 2000s. Now China doesn't really care about Taiwanese investment. China is the biggest economy after USA, right? However, Taiwanese investment really boost up China's, especially on the IT, this kind of assembling everything, products in the 1990s and early 2000s, okay? What Taiwan, I would say, the key factor of the Taiwanese companies in China, which I always say that you could take a look at Foxconn, notorious, yeah? It's the quality control and the disciplined management, right? So that means that Taiwanese factory is very militant-wise. It's very in terms of the quality. You have to meet the quality and you have to be very disciplined, okay? And it's very, to me, also very interesting to find that I would think China as a one-party country, the factory control will be really like a rock solid, but actually they are not yet to achieve what Taiwanese company can do in terms of the quality control and disciplined management. It looks really good in a sense of the year rate, especially in the semiconductor manufacturing. The year rate, that means that you have to have the 99.9% successful rate of the chips. You need to have your quality control. You need your work to be disciplined, which I will get into that later. So far, the Chinese semiconductor manufacturing factory still not quite yet to get into this quality control and discipline management. And that, if you ask me, how can China, such a iron fist country, cannot do the factory control? I have no idea because I'm not able to really visit the Chinese factory anymore. But what I would say is that's what Taiwanese factory or Taiwanese management factory can beat the Chinese in a sense. So now let's get into the TSMC. Taiwan has TSMC, but the TSMC is not just born from nowhere. TSMC actually started after the Taiwanese government established E3, Industrial of Technology and Research Institute, I mentioned in 1973, and also after Hsinchu Science Park set up. Maurice Zhang, the chairman of the TSMC, he was working at E3 at the beginning, and then spin off to establish TSMC. So to establish a semiconductor factory, they called as a foundry, needs a lot of money, the capital, right? The government at the time provides the governmental support in terms of the capital support, but also located other funds to support the TSMC to establish. But more so, as I mentioned, the government back then, Taiwanese government negotiate with American governments and American company to have the knowledge transfer, and also negotiate with Philips, the Dutch company, to have the knowledge transfer. So the government back then, as an authoritarian government at the time of Taiwan, 1980, was on the driving seat to select this company, select this industry, and base all the efforts on the industry. So it was a developmental state model. That means that the government decide to choose on certain industry and put all the effort on it. Taiwan was under that developmental state model. And then you would say, well, then now Taiwan is a democracy. It is a democracy. So it would not be able to actually rely on the government support forever, because government now in Taiwan do not have that much of money. So in the post-developmental state model, then what can sustain TSMC? Resilience of every one young engineers, they're high skilled, and also they work in a 12-hour shifts, and then they also have a lot of the exhaustions and everything they have. All the TSMC workers or engineers that I should say that I have been able to speak with, they all told me that they are in a very high pressure environment. Of course, you will say, but they've been paid well off. Yes, they've been paid well off. They have a lot of bonus, but they may not be able to see their families. This is what Taiwan actually can produce, in a sense of the really working very hard, and also to sustain, and also generation after generation in that sense. Even now, I would say the young generation of the TSMC workers, they still keep this kind of the commitments. If you like, when I say commitment, some of my generous critique will say the commitment to money. Yes, there's commitment to money, but in that sense, the money comparatively still lower than the money that would have to be paid in the USA, in Germany, in that sense. So comparatively still cheaper. So what else TSMC is good at? What I wanted to say is, it's not just about one company, TSMC. It is also about the whole satellite, small companies to support TSMC. So TSMC, they have various small companies that support them, and that's in Hsinchu Science Park. They are all together to support TSMC. So again, TSMC is on the spotlight, which they never wanted to. Actually, TSMC is very low key. If you notice, they never accept the news or a reporter's interview. Like, they don't do that a lot, and they never wanted to be noticed. And they actually work along with a group of satellite companies. Okay. This also come into later if you want to discuss whether TSMC will be able to migrate elsewhere, to Arizona, to Germany. Those satellite companies will have to go with the TSMC in that sense. Yeah. So this is just to give you some image in terms of the engineers, what they are wearing of this kind of the clean suits they are wearing for 12 hours in the clean room. The earlier picture was a clean room. And the engineers, they usually have two mobiles, and they have to, they can't use their personal mobile in the foundry. They will have to just take the company's mobile, and they have to answer on call all the time. Yeah. But yes, they have a lot of the bonus. So this is what I would say from the human talent parts and from the institutional setting part, why and how Taiwan, this little island, has such a prominent chip manufacturing company, TSMC. But then the question is whether this will share Taiwan, okay? So I have only one small different opinion from what Brian said yesterday. China actually, originally China actually, especially Huawei, needs to use TSMC's chips, but Huawei actually under Americans' export control because Taiwan is subject to American export control. TSMC stopped manufacturing for Huawei's chips in 2020. So now, this month, you will see Huawei actually announced that they can manufacturing 7 nanometers chips. Okay, so there's still probably linkage between Taiwan and China in terms of chip, but not the advanced chip because it was subject to Americans' export control. Taiwan has to comply with. TSMC has to comply with, right? So I'm not very sure whether this put Taiwan into a better spot, but it's also just to show you this is a very recent report of the Silicon Triangle that was published by Stanford Hoover Institution. It's to talk about United States, Taiwan, China. So the talk actually, well, it's 425 pages report. So I'm not reporting you all that, but it's to say that the United States actually, apart from sanctioning a lot of the export control, recognize this is a triangle. Somehow, Taiwan, of course, is in the center, but somehow that China cannot be out of this triangle. Okay, but the tricky question would be how that would be keep Taiwan safer and keep China away or later develop of the advanced chip. I think that's a big question that people in this field, including myself, are trying to figure out. So I will end my presentation here, and Nancy has been very helpful for me to present my little blog of Taiwan Insight. It's welcome all of your contributions, and it's about everything about Taiwan. So anything related to Taiwan, very welcome to contact me, and I will be happy to share with you our editorial team and to present your observation about Taiwan on our Taiwan Insight. Work along with New Group, let's say. Thank you.